It all started when I decided to buy my first house, thinking it would be a fun adventure. One chilly evening in late autumn, I was scrolling through Craigslist, looking for furniture when I stumbled upon an ad that made my heart race. Victorian house for sale, great deal. The picture showed an old house with intricate woodwork and a wraparound porch. Sure, it looked a bit worn, but I thought it had character. And the price? Unbelievable. I couldn't resist. I called my girlfriend, Mia, to share the news. "Hey, you won't believe what I found." "The perfect house," I said, practically bouncing off the walls. "Perfect? Really? Did you even check the neighborhood?" she replied, sounding skeptical as usual. "Come on, it's a steal. We can fix it up together. It'll be fun," I insisted, trying to convince her. After a bit of back and forth, I managed to drag her to see the place. The moment we stepped inside, I felt something. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was an eerie vibe that sent a chill down my spine. Still, I was too excited to care. Mia, on the other hand, seemed less impressed. "This place is old," she said, her eyes scanning the dusty corners. "Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely. Just think of how cool it'll be once we renovate it," I replied, ignoring her concerns. We signed the papers that day, and just like that, I was a homeowner. The first few nights were magical. I loved the creaky floors and the way the light filtered through the old windows. Mia was still a bit uneasy, but I brushed it off. We spent weekends painting and decorating, making the place our own. But soon, things started to get weird. It began with small things, doors that would creak open on their own, lights flickering for no reason, and cold spots that seemed to follow me around. I joked about it at first, saying the house was just settling. Mia wasn't laughing. "Tom, this place gives me the creeps." "Are you sure we should be here?" she asked one night as we were watching TV. "It's an old house, Mia. It's just got some quirks," I said, trying to sound reassuring. But deep down, I felt a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. As the weeks went by, the weirdness escalated. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, only to find nothing there. One evening, while I was in the kitchen, I felt a cold breeze rush past me, even though all the windows were closed. I looked at Mia, who was sitting at the table, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you feel that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, and it's freaking me out," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I tried to laugh it off, but the laughter felt hollow. I could see the worry in Mia's eyes, and it made me question my own sanity. Was I imagining things? Was the house really haunted, or was I just being paranoid? One rainy Saturday, I decided to explore the attic. I figured if I was going to live in this place, I might as well know its history. The attic was dusty and filled with old boxes. I started rummaging through them, hoping to find something interesting. That's when I found it, a small, leather-bound diary tucked away in a corner. The cover was cracked, and the pages were yellowed with age. My heart raced as I opened it, and what I read sent chills down my spine. The diary belonged to a woman named Margaret who lived in the house over 100 years ago. She wrote about her life, her family, and then the entries took a dark turn. There were mentions of strange occurrences, whispers in the night, and a tragic fire that claimed the lives of her children. The last entry was haunting. I can hear them calling to me. I fear I will join them soon. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I rushed downstairs, diary in hand, to show Mia. "You won't believe what I found," I exclaimed, my voice shaking. As I read the entries aloud, I could see the color drain from her face. "Tom, this is really disturbing," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to get out of here." The next few days were a blur of anxiety and fear. The house felt alive, and not in a good way. Doors slammed shut, lights flickered more than ever, and I started to feel like I was being watched. I couldn't sleep, and the paranoia crept in like a shadow. I'd hear whispers when I was alone, and sometimes I thought I saw figures out of the corner of my eye. Mia was at her breaking point. "I can't take this anymore, Tom. We need to leave," she shouted one night after a particularly terrifying episode where we both heard a child's laughter echoing through the halls. "I can't just abandon it. This is our home." I argued, but deep down, I knew she was right. The excitement I had felt when I first bought the house had vanished, replaced by a gnawing dread. After a few more sleepless nights, we made the decision to sell the house. I couldn't bear the thought of staying there any longer. We put it on the market, and thankfully, it sold quickly. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as we packed our things and prepared to move. But as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still with us. The air felt heavy, and I glanced back at the house one last time, a shiver running down my spine. We moved into a new apartment in the city, hoping for a fresh start. But it didn't take long for the haunting to follow us. It started with small things, objects moving, strange noises at night, and that same cold breeze I had felt in the house. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew better. Mia was terrified. "Tom, this can't be happening." "We left that house behind," she cried one night as we lay in bed, the shadows dancing on the walls. I know. But it feels like it's still here," I admitted, my heart racing. I could feel the paranoia creeping back in, and I started to question everything. Was I losing my mind? Was I just imagining things? As the days turned into weeks, the haunting began to take a toll on me. I couldn't focus at work, and every little sound made my heart race. I found myself jumping at shadows and avoiding dark corners. Mia tried to comfort me, but I could see the fear in her eyes too. "Tom, we need to talk to someone. This isn't normal," she said one evening, her voice filled with concern. "I don't know what to do, Mia." "It's like we brought something back with us," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. One night, after a particularly rough day, I decided I had to confront whatever was haunting us. I gathered my courage and spoke aloud in the darkened room. "If you're here, show yourself. I'm not afraid of you," I shouted, my voice echoing in the silence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the lights flickered, and I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room. I could hear whispers, faint but clear, and I knew I had crossed a line. The fear gripped me, and I stumbled back, realizing that I had awakened something I couldn't control. In the end, we learned that some things can't be left behind. The haunting had become a part of us, a constant reminder of the house that had seemed like a dream but turned into a nightmare. We moved on, but the fear lingered, always just beneath the surface. Mia and I grew closer through the experience, but we were forever changed. We learned the hard way that ignorance can lead to terrifying consequences, and sometimes, the supernatural isn't just a story, it can become your reality. Now, as I sit here writing this, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see a shadow lurking in the corner. The fear may have followed us, but we're determined to face it together. After all, what's life without a little bit of adventure, even if it's terrifying? I've always had a thing for antiques. There's something magical about old items, like they carry stories from the past. So, when I stumbled upon a Craigslist listing for an ornate mirror, I couldn't resist. It was spring, and the world was coming alive again, but I felt drawn to this dusty, forgotten piece of history. I drove to a small, cluttered antique shop on the edge of town called Green's Antiques. The sign was faded, and the windows were so dusty that I could barely see inside. But I knew this was the place. As soon as I stepped in, the smell of old wood and mothballs hit me. The shop was crammed with all sorts of items, furniture, trinkets, and of course, mirrors. "Welcome," a voice called out. I turned to see Mr. Green, the shop owner. He was an older man with a friendly smile and glasses perched on the edge of his nose. "Looking for something special?" "I saw a mirror listed online. I think it's here," I replied, my excitement bubbling over. "Ah, yes. The ornate one." "Follow me," he said, leading me through the narrow aisles. I could feel my heart racing as we approached a large, gilded mirror standing against the wall. It was stunning, with intricate carvings along the edges and a glass surface that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. "That's it," I exclaimed, practically bouncing on my feet. "It's beautiful." "It has quite a history," Mr. Green said, his tone shifting slightly. "But it's also been through some dark times." I shrugged off his warning. I was too enchanted by the mirror to care about its past. I handed over the cash, and Mr. Green wrapped it up carefully. "Take good care of it," he said, his eyes lingering on the mirror as if he were saying goodbye. Once I got the mirror home, I couldn't stop staring at it. I hung it in my living room, and it instantly became the centerpiece of my home. I loved how it reflected the light and made the room feel bigger. But soon, I noticed something strange. Sometimes, when I looked into it, I didn't just see my reflection. I saw flashes of other scenes, dark, chaotic moments that sent chills down my spine. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe I was just tired or stressed. But the more I looked, the more I saw. I'd catch glimpses of people arguing, shadows moving, and even flashes of violence. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But the images kept coming, and my fascination turned into an obsession. I started spending hours in front of the mirror, trying to understand what I was seeing. I felt like I was being pulled into another world, one filled with pain and anger. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced I could hear whispers coming from the mirror. It was like it was alive, and it wanted to show me something. One afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth about the mirror. I drove back to Green's Antiques, my heart pounding. When I walked in, Mr. Green looked up from behind the counter, a knowing look in his eyes. "Back so soon?" he asked, a hint of concern in his voice. "I need to know more about the mirror," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "What happened to it? Why does it show those scenes?" Mr. Green sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It's not just a mirror, Karen. It's a portal of sorts. It reflects the emotions and events that have happened around it. And some of those events are dark." "Dark? What do you mean?" I pressed, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. He hesitated, then continued, "There was a family that owned it long ago. They went through a terrible tragedy. The mirror witnessed it all, the arguments, the violence, and ultimately, the loss of life. It holds those memories, and it seems to share them with whoever looks into it." I felt a chill run down my spine. "So, it's haunted?" Haunted is one way to put it. It's more like it's trapped in a cycle of pain. The more you look, the more it affects you, he warned. I shook my head, trying to process this. But I can't stop looking. I need to understand. Sometimes, ignorance is bliss, Karen. You might be better off without it, he said, his voice low and serious. That night, I couldn't shake Mr. Green's words from my mind. I sat in front of the mirror, determined to confront whatever it was that haunted me. As I stared into the glass, the images started to swirl, more vivid than ever. I saw a woman screaming, a man with rage in his eyes, and then, horrifyingly, a violent confrontation that ended in blood. I gasped, stumbling back from the mirror. My heart raced, and I felt like I was going to be sick. The scenes were too much. I couldn't handle it anymore. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. The mirror wasn't just reflecting the past, it was consuming me. I rushed back to the antique shop the next day, nearly bursting through the door. "Mr. Green, I need to get rid of it," I shouted, panic rising in my chest. He looked at me, concern etched on his face. "I warned you, didn't I? You can't just destroy it. It will only make things worse." "I don't care. I can't keep living like this," I cried, feeling desperate. He sighed deeply, then nodded. "All right. But you need to understand that breaking it won't erase what you've seen. It will still be a part of you." With Mr. Green's help, we carefully removed the mirror from my car. I felt a mix of relief and dread as we carried it outside. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I grabbed a hammer from Mr. Green's workshop, my hands shaking. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady. I nodded, tears brimming in my eyes. I swung the hammer against the glass, and it shattered into a million pieces. The sound echoed in the quiet street, and for a moment, I felt a rush of freedom. But then, as the shards fell to the ground, I felt a wave of darkness wash over me. It was as if the mirror had released all the pain it had held. I stumbled back, gasping for air. I could hear the whispers again, louder now, swirling around me like a storm. I felt the weight of the past pressing down on me, and I knew that even though the mirror was gone, its memories would haunt me forever. In the weeks that followed, I tried to move on, but it wasn't easy. I felt like I was being watched, like the shadows of the past were still lurking just out of sight. I avoided mirrors altogether, afraid of what I might see. I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror had left a part of itself with me, a dark stain on my soul. I visited Mr. Green one last time, hoping for some closure. I destroyed it, but I still feel it, I confessed, my voice trembling. He nodded, his expression somber. "The past doesn't just disappear, Karen. It shapes us, whether we want it to or not. You'll carry it with you." I left the shop feeling hollow. I had wanted to escape the mirror's grip, but now I realized that I couldn't escape the memories it had shown me. They were a part of me, and I had to learn to live with them. As spring turned into summer, I tried to find a new normal. I filled my home with fresh flowers and bright colors, hoping to drown out the darkness. But late at night, when the world was quiet, I'd still feel that familiar chill, I'd catch glimpses of shadows in the corners of my vision, and I knew the mirror's haunting presence was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. I learned that obsession can lead us down dark paths, and sometimes, the past holds more horrors than we can handle. The mirror may have been shattered, but its impact on my life would linger forever. I was left with the knowledge that some stories are better left untold, and some reflections are best left unseen. It felt surreal to be searching for a new roommate, especially after everything that happened with Alone. The apartment, once filled with laughter and life, now felt like a hollow shell. I kept replaying the last time I saw her, wondering how one day she was there, and the next, she was gone without a trace. The worry nagged at me every single day. It was winter, and the chill in the air seeped into my bones. I was a college student, trying to juggle classes, work, and the stress of living alone. I didn't want to be by myself, especially in this big apartment. So, I decided to look for a new roommate. I figured it would help with the rent and ease my anxiety about being alone. I posted an ad on Craigslist, hoping to find someone who would fit in well. After a few days, I got a message from a girl named Kylie. She seemed perfect, friendly, responsible, and looking for a place to stay. We chatted for a bit, and I felt a good vibe. But there was one thing that struck me as odd. She had no online presence. No social media, no references, nothing. It made me uneasy, but I was desperate. I needed someone to share the rent and help me feel less alone. We set up a time for her to come over and check out the apartment. When she arrived, I was surprised by how charming she was. She had a warm smile and a relaxed demeanor. We talked about everything from school to our favorite shows. I felt a connection, and for a moment, I forgot about Alone. After showing her around, I offered her the room. She accepted right away, and I was relieved. I thought maybe this was the fresh start I needed. But as the days went by, I started to notice some strange things. At first, it was small stuff. I'd leave my books on the coffee table, and they'd be moved to the shelf. I thought maybe I was just being forgetful. But then I started hearing noises at night, soft thuds and whispers that made my skin crawl. I tried to convince myself it was just the building settling or the wind outside, but deep down, I knew something was off. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. My heart raced as I lay in bed, frozen under the covers. I listened closely, and the footsteps seemed to be coming from the living room. I wanted to call out to Kylie, but I was too scared. What if it wasn't her? I finally mustered the courage to get out of bed. I tiptoed to the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. The lights were off, and the apartment was dark. I flipped on the switch, and the light flooded the room. Everything looked normal, but I felt a chill run down my spine. Kylie? I called out, but there was no answer. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I checked her room, but the door was locked. I knocked lightly, but still no response. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. I decided to go back to bed, but sleep didn't come easy. I kept thinking about Alone and how I hadn't done enough to find her. The next day, I tried to brush off the weirdness. I figured I was just being paranoid. But then, things got even stranger. I found a small notebook on the kitchen counter that I was sure I hadn't left there. It was filled with notes about the apartment, but there were also strange drawings, sketches of people, some of them looked like Alone. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Kylie, did you leave this here? I asked when I saw her later. "Oh, that? I found it lying around. I thought I'd keep it," she said with a casual shrug. I forced a smile, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to dig a little deeper. I started looking around the apartment for anything else unusual. That's when I noticed the door at the end of the hallway that I had never seen before. It was partially hidden behind a bookshelf, and it looked old and worn. My heart raced as I approached it. I knocked lightly, but there was no answer. I turned the handle, and to my surprise, it opened. The room inside was dark, and I couldn't see much at first. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. What I found inside made my blood run cold. The room was small and cluttered, filled with old furniture and boxes. But what caught my eye were the walls. They were covered with more drawings, and there were photos taped up, photos of Alolan. My stomach dropped. This was not just a hidden room, it felt like a shrine. I stumbled back, my mind racing. What was Kylie doing in here? Why did she have these pictures? I felt sick. I needed to confront her, but I was terrified of what I might discover. I went back to the living room, trying to act normal. "Hey, Kylie, can we talk?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Sure, what's up?" she replied, looking up from her phone. "I found a hidden room in the apartment," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And it had some strange stuff in it." Her expression changed. For a moment, she looked surprised, but then her smile returned, almost too quickly. "Oh, that old room? It's just a storage space. Nothing to worry about." I didn't believe her. "It had pictures of Alolan in it, Kylie. Why do you have those?" Her demeanor shifted, and I could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it anger? Fear? "I just wanted to know more about her," she said, her voice low. She seemed interesting. I felt a chill run down my spine. Interesting? "She's missing, Kylie. You can't just collect pictures of someone like that." Kylie stood up, her expression hardening. "You don't understand. I had to know what happened to her. I thought I could help." "Help? By hiding in a room and drawing pictures?" I shot back, feeling a mix of anger and fear. "I'm not the enemy here, Lisa," she yelled, her voice echoing in the apartment. "I just wanted to find the truth." I backed away, my heart racing. I felt trapped. I needed to get out of there. "I'm calling the police," I said, my voice shaking. "Don't do that," she shouted, and in that moment, I realized how dangerous this situation had become. I turned and ran for the door, but she grabbed my arm, her grip tight and desperate. "Please, just listen to me," she pleaded, but I could see the intensity in her eyes. I yanked my arm away and bolted out of the apartment. I raced down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear her footsteps behind me, but I didn't look back. I burst through the front door and into the cold winter air. I ran to my car, fumbling for my keys as I glanced back at the building. Kylie stood in the doorway, her face a mix of anger and something else, something I couldn't quite place. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and sped away, my heart racing. I drove straight to the police station, my mind racing with fear and confusion. I told them everything, about Alolan, about Kylie, about the hidden room and the drawings. They took my statement seriously and promised to look into it. Later that night, I learned that Kylie had a disturbing past. She had been involved in some strange online communities that focused on missing persons. The police found out she had been tracking Alohan's case and had even reached out to her before she disappeared. It made my skin crawl. I felt a mix of relief and dread. I was safe now, but the thought of what could have happened haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had let my guard down, trusting someone I barely knew. As winter settled in, I tried to move on, but the memory of that hidden room and Kylie's intense gaze stayed with me. I learned a hard lesson about trust and the dangers of online interactions. I was grateful to be safe, but I knew I'd always be cautious about who I let into my life. The world could be a scary place, and sometimes, the people you think you can trust are the ones you need to watch out for the most. Moving to a new city always feels like a mix of excitement and nerves. That's exactly how I felt standing in front of my new apartment. It was a modest two-bedroom place on a busy street, with a bit of old-fashioned charm that seemed out of place among the modern buildings around it. The brick facade was a bit worn, but it had character. I could already imagine myself living there, sipping coffee on the tiny balcony and soaking in the city vibe. I had just started a new job downtown, and this apartment was my fresh start. I found it on Craigslist, affordable rent, close to work, and cozy. Mr. Schneider, the landlord, was an older guy with a friendly smile. He assured me the apartment was in good shape, so I signed the lease without a second thought, eager to dive into my new life. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the creaky floorboards greeted me like an old friend. The living room was bright from the big window, and the walls were painted a soft yellow. I could already picture my furniture in the space. I tossed my bags on the couch and took a deep breath, taking in the scent of fresh paint and old wood. The first few days were a blur of unpacking and exploring the neighborhood. I found a cute coffee shop around the corner and made it my morning stop. I also met some neighbors. Lena, who lived next door, was friendly and seemed to know everyone in the building. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said with a big smile when we bumped into each other in the hallway. "This place has a lot of character, doesn't it?" "Yeah, it really does," I replied, trying to match her enthusiasm. "I love it so far." But soon, I started to notice little things that made me uneasy. The floors creaked more than I expected, and at night, I'd hear strange noises, like whispers or someone moving around. I tried to brush it off as the building settling or my imagination running wild. After all, it was a new place, and it was natural to feel a bit on edge. One evening, while unpacking a box in the spare bedroom, I found something odd. Behind the dresser, there was a small, dusty box. I opened it out of curiosity and found old photographs, a broken watch, a faded letter, and a small key. I wondered who had lived there before me. I decided to ask Mr. Schneider about it. When I mentioned the box, he chuckled. "Oh, that's just some stuff left behind by the last tenant. Don't worry about it." They were a little eccentric, but nothing to be concerned about. His casual attitude didn't sit right with me, but I let it go, figuring it was just part of the apartment's quirky history. As the weeks went by, I found more strange things. I discovered a hidden compartment in the closet with an old, dusty journal. The handwriting was shaky, and the content was unsettling. The previous tenant had written about feeling watched and hearing voices at night. I felt a chill as I read the words. One night, unable to shake my unease, I read more from the journal. The entries grew darker, describing paranoia, strange noises, and shadows in the corners. One entry mentioned that previous tenants had vanished without a trace. "It's like the apartment takes something from you," it said. "I can feel it pulling me in, and I'm scared I won't be able to leave." I slammed the journal shut, my hands shaking. It was too much. I tried to convince myself it was just the ramblings of someone who had lost their grip on reality. But deep down, I felt a creeping fear I couldn't shake. The next day, I confronted Mr. Schneider in the lobby. "Mr. Schneider, can we talk about the previous tenants? I found some things that are a bit concerning." He looked at me, his expression serious. "What do you mean?" "I found a journal that talks about strange things happening here. About people disappearing." He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Look, apartments have stories, and sometimes they aren't pretty. But I assure you, it's just an old building. People get scared and leave. It doesn't mean anything." His words didn't reassure me. "But what happened to those people? Why did they leave?" Mr. Schneider's expression hardened. "That's none of your business. Just focus on your life here. You're doing well, and that's what matters." I felt dismissed and frustrated. But I don't want to live in a place where I feel like I'm being watched or where something bad has happened. He gave me a tight smile. "You'll get used to it. Just give it time." That night, I couldn't sleep. The journal's words echoed in my mind, and every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the strange noises that seemed to grow louder. I felt trapped, as if the apartment was closing in on me. By morning, I had decided to leave. I packed my things quickly, my heart racing with each item I put in a box. I wanted to escape the dread that had settled over me like a heavy blanket. As I was loading my car, Lena came out of her apartment. "Hey! You're leaving?" she asked, surprised. "Yeah, I need to go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She frowned. "Is everything okay? You seemed so happy when you moved in." I hesitated. "It's just the apartment. It's not what I thought it was." Her expression softened. "I get it. This place can be a bit strange. But you'll find somewhere better. Just trust your instincts." I nodded, grateful for her understanding. As I drove away, I glanced back at the building one last time. It loomed behind me, a shadow of my short-lived adventure. I felt a mix of relief and lingering fear, as if something was still watching me from a distance. In the weeks that followed, I settled into a new apartment in a different part of the city. It was bright and cheerful, with no weird noises or hidden compartments. I felt a sense of freedom, but the memories of that old place lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had escaped something sinister. One day, I ran into Lena at the coffee shop. She looked concerned. "I heard you moved out. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm good now," I said, forcing a smile. "Just needed a change." She nodded but looked worried. "You know, I've heard some strange things about that building. People say it has a history." I felt a chill. "What do you mean?" "Just that, some tenants have had odd experiences. It's like the place has a life of its own." I couldn't help but shiver. "I know what you mean." I felt it too. As we chatted, I realized I wasn't alone in my experience. The apartment had a reputation, and I was just one of many who had felt its unsettling presence. Looking back, I saw that moving to the city was supposed to be a fresh start, but it turned into a lesson about the dangers of new beginnings. Sometimes, hidden secrets lurk in the most unexpected places, and it's essential to trust your instincts. I had escaped the apartment, but the memories haunted me. I learned to appreciate the safety of my new home and the importance of being aware of the stories that linger in the walls around us. As spring turned into summer, I embraced my new life, grateful for the lessons learned and the strength I found in leaving behind the shadows of the past. I never imagined I'd be the kind of guy taking odd jobs just to scrape by, but here I was, scrolling through Craigslist looking for work. I had bills piling up, and my usual handyman gigs just weren't cutting it. That's when I saw the ad, handyman needed for repairs in an old house. Good pay. Call Mr. Blackwood. The ad didn't say much, but the pay sounded decent. I figured it was worth a shot. I called the number, and Mr. Blackwood answered with a voice that was deep and a bit shaky. He sounded a little eccentric, but I didn't care. I needed the money. We set up a time for me to come by the next day. When I arrived at the house, I felt a chill run down my spine. The place was huge, with peeling paint and overgrown weeds in the yard. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I parked my truck and walked up to the front door, which creaked open as if it hadn't been used in ages. Mr. Blackwood greeted me with a wide grin. He was an older guy, maybe in his 60s, with wild gray hair and thick glasses. He wore an old sweater that looked like it had seen better days. "Welcome. I'm so glad you could come. This place needs a lot of work, and I'm not exactly handy," he said, chuckling. I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. It was a mix of dust, old wood, and something else I couldn't quite place. The inside was just as creepy as the outside, with dark corners and furniture covered in sheets. I felt a shiver run through me, but I pushed it aside. I needed the money. Mr. Blackwood showed me around, pointing out the things that needed fixing. The roof leaks, and the windows are drafty. Oh, and there's a strange noise coming from the basement. "I'm sure it's nothing, but I'd like you to check it out," he said, his eyes twinkling with a mix of excitement and nervousness. I nodded, trying to hide my unease. I wasn't a fan of dark, creepy basements, but I figured I could handle it. I got to work, starting with the roof. It was hard to focus, though. The house felt strange, like it was alive in some way. I kept hearing little noises, creaks and whispers, that made my skin crawl. After a few hours, I decided to take a break. I went to the kitchen to grab a drink, and that's when I noticed something odd. There were old photographs on the wall, showing people I didn't recognize. They looked like they were from another time, dressed in old-fashioned clothes. I felt a chill as I looked at their faces. They seemed to be watching me. I shook it off and went back to work. As I climbed up to fix the roof, I heard a loud bang coming from the basement. My heart raced. I told myself it was probably just the house settling or something. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. After finishing the roof, I grabbed a flashlight and headed down to the basement. The stairs creaked under my weight, and the air grew colder as I descended. When I reached the bottom, I shone my flashlight around. The basement was dark and filled with old furniture, boxes, and dust. I took a deep breath and moved further in, trying to ignore the feeling of dread creeping over me. That's when I noticed a door at the far end of the basement, half hidden behind some boxes. It looked old and worn, like it hadn't been opened in years. My curiosity got the better of me, so I walked over and tried the handle. To my surprise, it turned easily. I pushed the door open, and a wave of musty air hit me. Inside was a small room filled with old journals and strange artifacts. I picked up one of the journals and started flipping through it. The pages were filled with messy handwriting, documenting experiments on people. My stomach dropped as I read about disturbing things, strange rituals, tests, and names of people who had gone missing. I felt a rush of panic. What was this place? Why did Mr. Blackwood have these journals? I quickly put the journal down and turned to leave, but as I did, I heard a noise behind me. It was a low, rumbling sound, like someone, or something, was in the room with me. I bolted for the door, my heart racing. I stumbled up the stairs, nearly tripping in my haste. I burst into the main part of the house, gasping for breath. Mr. Blackwood was waiting for me in the living room, looking concerned. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. Yeah, just a little dusty down there," I said, trying to sound casual. But I could feel the fear creeping into my voice. He smiled, but there was something unsettling about it. Good. Just be careful. The house has its quirks," he said, his tone almost too cheerful. I forced a smile and nodded, but my mind was racing. I needed to get out of there. I finished up the repairs as quickly as I could, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside made me jump. Finally, I finished the last of the repairs and headed for the door. "Thanks for the work, Mr. Blackwood. I'll send you an invoice," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course. You did a wonderful job," he replied, his smile still plastered on his face. But there was something in his eyes that made me uneasy. As I stepped outside, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I quickly got into my truck and drove away, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Mr. Blackwood standing in the driveway, watching me leave. The next few days were a blur. I tried to put the experience behind me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I kept thinking about those journals and what I had read. I started to feel like I was being watched, even in my own home. I couldn't sleep at night, jumping at every little sound. I started seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye, and I swore I could hear whispers when I was alone. It was like the house had left a part of itself with me, and I couldn't escape it. Then, one evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have looked in the basement." My heart dropped. I felt a chill run down my spine. Was it Mr. Blackwood? Had he been watching me this whole time? I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just a prank. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I started to feel paranoid, like I was being hunted. I couldn't go back to that house, but I also couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Blackwood was somehow tracking me. Days turned into weeks, and the feeling of dread only grew stronger. I couldn't focus on anything, and I started avoiding going out. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, trapped in my own mind. Finally, I decided I had to confront this fear. I called Mr. Blackwood to ask if he needed any more work done, hoping to get some answers. When he picked up, his voice was cheerful, but there was an edge to it. "Ah, Ryan. I was wondering when you'd call. I have some more projects for you." Yeah, about that basement," I started, but he cut me off. "Don't worry about the basement. Just focus on the work. I promise you'll be fine," he said, his tone almost too reassuring. I hung up, my heart racing. I knew I couldn't go back there. I had to get away from this place, away from him. I packed my things and decided to stay with a friend for a while. As I drove away, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. But even as I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Blackwood was still watching me, lurking in the shadows. I had taken a risk for survival, and now I was paying the price. I didn't know what secrets the old house held, but I was sure of one thing: I would never go back. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd go hunting for free furniture on Craigslist. But here I was, scrolling through my phone in our dimly lit apartment, surrounded by boxes and the faint smell of takeout. My daughter, Lily, was playing with her toys on the floor, completely unaware of how tight things were for us. I had just moved into this cramped place in a rundown neighborhood, and I was desperate to make it feel like home. That's when I saw it, a free couch. It was a little worn, but it looked cozy enough. The ad said it was in a quiet suburb, just a short drive away. I felt a mix of excitement and guilt. I wanted to give Lily a nice place to sit and relax, but I hated that I couldn't afford anything new. Still, I figured a free couch was better than nothing. "Hey, Lily. How about we go on an adventure?" I called out to her. She looked up, her big blue eyes sparkling with curiosity. "We're going to get a couch." "Yay! A couch," she squealed, jumping up and down. I couldn't help but smile. If nothing else, I knew she'd be excited about it. The next day, we set off. I put on my old sneakers, grabbed the address, and we hopped into my beat-up car. The drive was quiet, and I tried to shake off the nagging feeling in my gut. I didn't know why, but something felt off about this whole couch situation. When we arrived, the house looked normal enough, just another suburban home with a neat lawn and a white picket fence. I knocked on the door, and a middle-aged man answered. He had a friendly smile, but his eyes seemed a little too intense. "Hi there. You must be here for the couch," he said, stepping aside to let us in. The inside of the house was dim, the curtains drawn tight. I could feel a chill in the air as we walked through the narrow hallway. "Yeah, thanks for giving it away," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Lily tugged at my hand, looking around with wide eyes. The couch was in the living room, and it was bigger than I expected. It had a soft, faded fabric that seemed inviting. I could picture us snuggling up on it for movie nights. "Do you need help loading it?" the man asked. "No, I think we can manage," I replied, feeling a little uneasy. I didn't want to overstay my welcome. After a bit of struggle, we finally got the couch into my car. Lily was thrilled, bouncing in her seat as we drove back. "It's so big, Mommy. I can't wait to sit on it." "Me too, sweetie," I said, trying to match her excitement. But as we drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the whole situation. When we got home, I pushed the couch into the living room, and it took up most of the space. I fluffed the cushions and let out a sigh of relief. At least we had something to sit on now. That night, as we settled in for bedtime, I started hearing whispers. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. I tucked Lily into bed, reading her a story, but I could still hear those faint voices. They seemed to echo around the room, making me feel uneasy. "Mommy, what's that noise?" Lily asked, her eyes wide. "It's nothing, honey. Just the wind," I replied, forcing a smile. but I didn't believe it. As the days passed, the whispers grew louder. Shadows danced in the corners of the room, and I often caught glimpses of something moving out of the corner of my eye. I started to dread being alone in the apartment. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the couch, I noticed a scene that looked different. Curiosity got the best of me, and I pulled at it. To my shock, a hidden compartment popped open. Inside were old photographs, faded images of people staring blankly at the camera. They looked like they were watching me. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who were these people? Why were their pictures hidden in my couch? I quickly closed the compartment, my heart racing. That night, the whispers turned into soft laughter. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. One evening, I was sitting on the couch, trying to watch TV with Lily. The shadows seemed to grow darker, and the whispers became more insistent. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "Mommy, I don't like it here," Lily said, her voice trembling. "Me neither, sweetie," I admitted, feeling a wave of panic wash over me. I couldn't let her feel scared. I had to do something. That's when I made the decision. I would get rid of the couch. I didn't care if it was free or how much I needed it. I couldn't let whatever was haunting us stay any longer. The next day, I dragged the couch outside and set it on fire. I watched as the flames danced and crackled, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. But as the fire burned, the whispers grew louder, almost angry. I could see shadows swirling around the flames, and I felt a chill in the air. Even after the couch was reduced to ashes, the whispers didn't stop. They followed me back inside, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. I couldn't escape them. After a few more nights of torment, I knew I had to leave. I packed up our things, trying to ignore the feeling of dread that hung in the air. I found a new place in a better neighborhood, and I hoped that moving would help us start fresh. But even in the new apartment, I still heard the whispers. They were softer now, but they were there, lurking in the background. I tried to convince myself it was just stress, but deep down, I knew something had followed us. As I lay in bed at night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of paranoia creeping in. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if the shadows would come back. I wanted to give Lily a safe home, but I felt like I was losing my mind. I realized that the fear of the unknown was more powerful than I ever imagined. I was just trying to provide for my daughter, and now I was haunted by the very thing I thought would make our lives better. In the end, I learned that sometimes, the things we think will help us can bring more trouble than we bargained for. And as I listened to the whispers in the dark, I knew that I would always be looking over my shoulder, wondering if the shadows would ever truly leave us alone. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to post a missing pet ad on Craigslist, but here I was, sitting in my truck and staring at my phone. My dog, Max, had been missing for days, and I was starting to lose hope. We had just moved into this old farmhouse out in the country. Laura, my wife, and the kids loved it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The woods around us were thick and dark, and the fields seemed to stretch on forever. It felt like we were all alone out here. Max was my buddy. He loved to explore, especially in this new place. But this time, he didn't come back when I called him. I searched everywhere, calling his name until my throat hurt. Nothing. Laura tried to comfort me, saying he'd probably just wandered off and would find his way home. But I knew Max. He was smart and loyal. He always came when I called. Something felt really wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Max out there, alone and scared. I imagined all the terrible things that could have happened to him. Was he hurt? Did someone take him? Or worse? I didn't even want to think about it. The next day, I decided to post an ad on Craigslist, offering a reward for Max's safe return. I figured someone had to have seen him, and maybe a little cash would motivate them to help. A few days passed with no responses, and I was starting to lose hope. Then one night, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. "I know where your dog is," it said. "Meet me at the old barn on Maple Road tomorrow at midnight if you want to see him again." My heart raced. Was this for real? Was someone actually trying to help me? Or was it a sick joke? I showed the message to Laura, and she freaked out. "Mark, don't go. It could be a trap. What if it's dangerous?" But I couldn't ignore it. If there was even a chance that Max was out there, I had to try. I promised Laura I'd be careful and said I'd call the cops if anything seemed off. That night, I drove to the old barn, my mind racing. What if it was a hoax? What if I was walking into a trap? But the thought of Max out there alone was too much to bear. When I pulled up, the barn was dark. The only light came from the moon, casting creepy shadows everywhere. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, my heart pounding. The barn was empty except for a few old tools and some hay. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. Then I heard a voice from the shadows. "You came." A tall, thin man stepped out, his face mostly hidden in the dark. "Where's my dog?" I demanded, trying to sound tough. The man chuckled, but it sent chills down my spine. "Your dog is safe, for now. But he won't be for long if you don't do exactly as I say." I felt sick. What did he mean? What did he want from me? He stepped closer, and I could see his face better. He had dark eyes and a twisted smile that made me uneasy. "I want you to bring me $10,000 in cash. No cops, no tricks. If you try anything, your dog dies." $10,000? I felt my stomach drop. Where was I supposed to get that kind of money? And what if it was a trap? What if I brought the money and they still hurt Max? But I couldn't take that chance. Max was my best friend, and I'd do anything to keep him safe. I told the man I'd get the money and meet him back there tomorrow night. As I drove home, my mind was racing. What was I going to do? How could I get that much money? And what if it wasn't enough? What if they still hurt Max? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning as I tried to figure out a plan. I knew I couldn't go to the cops, not with Max's life on the line. But I also couldn't just hand over $10,000 to some creep without knowing for sure that Max would be safe. The next night, I drove back to the barn with a duffel bag full of cash in the passenger seat. I stepped inside, my heart pounding again. The man was waiting for me. "Do you have it?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, my throat dry. "Where's Max?" He chuckled again, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "First, the money." I handed him the bag, watching as he opened it and rifled through the cash. He seemed satisfied, a twisted smile on his face. "Good. Now, follow me." He led me deeper into the barn to a small room in the back. There, in the corner, was Max, curled up and looking scared. I rushed to him, scooping him up in my arms. "Max." "Oh, buddy, I'm so sorry." Max whimpered and nuzzled into my chest. I could feel tears in my eyes as I held him close. I was so relieved he was alive, but something still felt wrong. As I turned to leave, the man stepped in front of me, blocking the doorway. "Not so fast," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "I have one more thing to show you." He led me to the other side of the room, where creepy messages were scrawled across the walls. "Your dog is safe, for now," one read. Another said, "I'm watching you." I felt sick as I read the messages, realizing this guy had been planning this for a long time. He had been watching us, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The man chuckled again, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "You should have listened to your wife, Mark. Now, you're in too deep." I knew then that I couldn't trust him. He would never let Max go. He was a sick individual who got off on other people's pain. And I had walked right into his trap. As I drove home, Max curled up beside me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I would never be safe again. This man was out there, somewhere, and he knew where I lived. He knew my family, my friends, everything about me. I knew I had to do something, but I was scared. I was scared for Max, for Laura, and the kids, for myself. I didn't know who I could trust or who I could turn to for help. All I knew was that I had to keep Max safe, no matter what. I had to protect him from the darkness that was closing in around us. And I would do whatever it took to keep him by my side, even if it meant facing my own fears. Because in the end, Max was more than just a pet. He was my best friend, my protector, my reason for living. And I would never let anyone take him away from me, not without a fight.